So new CNN polling gives President Biden a measly 38% approval rating, his lowest yet in a CNN survey. You know, it's CNN, so it's likely a lot more left-leaning. The president is fully underwater on voters' top issues. Only 30% of respondents approve of his performance on the economy, 25% on inflation. I don't know who approves of that, but 39% on immigration and 46% on the war in Ukraine.
And as Biden continues to hemorrhage support in the polls, other prominent Democrats have begun to take matters into their own hands. According to new reporting from CNBC, Vice President Kamala Harris and California Governor Gavin Newsom quietly meeting with Democratic donors and party officials in apparent anticipation of launching their own presidential campaigns in 2024. Our rising panel joins us now to weigh in. Ameshia Cross is a political commentator and Democratic strategist, and Jeff Charles is host of A Fresh Perspective and a contributor at Red State and Liberty Nation. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here.
So, Ameshia, I'll start with you. Nothing seems to be going right for the Biden administration whatsoever. Is it truly getting so desperate that Democrats have to look outside Biden? You know, a possibility that I've really discounted a lot on the show because I can't imagine him stepping aside really for every reason because it's just so rare for people to give up power. But, you know, put me inside the mindset of the Democratic Party right now.
Well, I think that the Democratic Party right now is frustrated, and rightfully so, frustrated with what we're seeing with these polling numbers, the numbers that you shot off earlier, particularly the ones around inflation. As we know, economically, the economic situation in America right now has actually improved drastically since the start of the pandemic, and actually since the start of this year. These numbers are amazing in terms of jobs that are available, in terms of where our economy happens to be going. But a lot of that takes a downside because of where the inflationary costs happen to be, because the cost of living has increased, because the cost of regular everyday things like groceries, like gas, are really hitting people hard. And I think that this administration has to grapple with that. It's not just reporting on the good economic numbers in terms of job availability. It's also looking at the pocketbook issues that many Americans are facing every single day. With that being said, we also have to talk about reality. President Biden is going to be 81 come the next election cycle, come the presidential election. Former President Trump isn't too far behind him. I think he's going to be 78 at that time. These would be two particularly old candidates. We have not seen something like that in our nation's history. So I do think that for many Americans, the age issue is one of them. But also, again, looking at the fact that they feel as though these pocketbook issues have not necessarily gone in the favor of Americans, particularly Americans who are on the lower rung, particularly Americans who are already low income, where it's hitting them the hardest. But I don't think that we should use any of this to say that President Biden will not run again. Thus far, we have seen no indication of that from him. And we're going to hear from several Democratic or would-be Democratic candidates that they might do it, but they will only do it if this president decides that he's not going to run. I think that's the big asterisk that we have to have in this conversation.
You know, Jeff, there is a lot of talk about Biden's age. I personally don't think that age has anything to do with his low approval ratings or why people are hesitant about him. I do think it has to do with running the country and the government. But, you know, as Ameshia just said, Trump's not far behind age-wise. Is that at all anything that anyone is talking about when it comes to what the Republican candidate might look like?
Not really. I mean, on the Republican side, people are not really concerned about Trump's age. And even if he doesn't run, we'll have a younger candidate. But yeah, age isn't really a factor here. I think what the factor is when people go to the gas station to fill up their cars, they know how much they're paying versus how much they were paying under Biden's predecessor. When they go to get groceries, they know the difference between what they're paying now and what they were paying before. So I think the economic issues are impacting this far more than age. And besides, when you look at these two men, I mean, they're both definitely on in years, but there's a clear difference between how that age is affecting both. Trump is having a lot of the cognitive issues that Biden has seemed to display. It's a totally different ballgame. So on the conservative side, that the age isn't really much of a factor here.
Yeah, Ameshia, what should the administration prioritize, to get back on message or to get people interested in voting Democrat again? Because it feels like a sinking ship. Feels like maybe the agenda isn't getting across. To the extent there is an agenda, it's a very, it's a very Ukraine-focused agenda, not a kind of agenda, I think, that resonates with struggling working class people at home.
So I disagree with that. I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback there. We have a Democratic Party that is working to fight against a lot of the culture wars that have led to the overturning of pretty seismic policy in the American society. Look at what just happened with Roe v. Wade. We're seeing state after state also try to topple and restrict women's reproductive rights. We're watching the advancement of anti-LGBT legislation in various states across the country. We're watching limits on civil rights across this country. The Democratic Party has long been the party of those who have been seen as less than, of those who are from diverse groups, of those who are fighting every day for the right to humanity, for the right to live under the Constitution that has provided those rights to so many people across this country, regardless of their race, their ethnicity, or their income level. And I think that the Democratic Party is showcasing that they are fighting for those. We have seen very little action from the right when it comes to the reaction to a lot of our crises in the mass shootings that we've seen across this country that continue to perpetuate. We're seeing Democrats be very strong, particularly in some of the recent statements we've seen from Kamala Harris, as she is pushing towards more liability for gun manufacturers, as she is also trying to make Congress move on being able to reinstitute the assault weapons ban. We're watching Democrats take the initiative when it comes to these things that are affecting Americans' everyday lives and the things that are ticker points for this country. We're watching them push environmental policy. We're watching them, and they are having a very hard time because of a lot of the conflict on the right and them not necessarily moving and not taking into account the things that matter to Americans the most. But back to your inflationary comments, I think that we also have to look at the fact that we're coming off of COVID-19. We're still in that session, but we're not in any way where we were 2 years ago. But with that being said, we still have supply chain issues. We still have a corporate structure in this country that is willing to push off costs on the backs of everyday Americans. And that corporate greed is what we're seeing in many cases.
Yeah, Ameshia, I completely agree with you that I think Democrats, when it comes to especially those more culture and rights, I do think Democrats are particularly strong in those areas. But I just wonder how much the average American cares about those things right now. I mean, I know plenty of people do care about all of those subjects. They definitely want those things. They want there to be some change. They want there to be equal rights and whatnot. But you know, a lot of people feel like that's kind of a luxury secondary thing for me to think about when I'm trying to put food on the table, when I'm trying to get a good job, I'm trying to get, you know, I'm being shut down by the government, or I've got these, you know, various different factors against me just supporting my family. I think then people start to care less about other people and their rights in that moment. They still care, but just it's not their top priority. So I want to ask you, Jeff, then, who would be then, if Biden is not going to run, if Democrats do say, okay, Biden, come on, step aside, and he steps aside, what's better for the whoever the eventual Republican nominee is, what's better for them? Would it be to run against Biden or maybe like Kamala or Gavin Newsom?
Well, what I've been saying is that if things continue the way they are, Republicans can run a platypus and still win in 2024. When it comes to Biden, I mean, he says he's going to run again. He has to say that. I don't believe for a second that he's going to seek re-election. He is way on up there in years. I think he wants to ride off into the sunset. And I think that that's exactly what the Democrats want as well. There was another poll that just came out, a New York and Siena poll, that showed that 64% of Democrat voters do not want Biden to run again. So I won't say it's a foregone conclusion that he's not going to run, but it's looking that way. As far as the Democrats have on the bench, that's not looking too good either. Vice President Kamala Harris is not polling well. She's polling worse than Biden. She has not caught on with the American public. People don't like her. I think that their best bet is probably California Governor Gavin Newsom. I think he knows it, which is why he's trying to get out there more. I mean, you saw that ad that he did from Florida. You see, he's been trying to get himself out there. He's probably the one that has the most level of charisma that could possibly make him a contender. But other than him, Democrats don't have much of a shot.
That's wild to me. I like Newsom so much less than Joe Biden, and I don't like Joe Biden very much. So I still can't imagine. I know that he's very old. A lot of people want him to not run again. It would be so historically unprecedented for someone to just cede power, to
Well,
give
but
up
you
the
never know.
opportunity to be
Robbie,
president again.
We're living in weird times. Everything that we
Well,
think
I
isn't
know,
going to
but-
happen happens at this point. So we can't rule anything out. But Ameshia, just real quickly, we have to play the game. If Biden's not going to,
We have to play the game. I agree with that.
If he's not going to be the nominee, who is the best shot for Democrats?
I absolutely believe that Biden's going to be the nominee, but without Biden, Kamala Harris, heir apparent, she's the vice president. There's no way that it would, sail past Kamala.
I actually do agree with that political
Please
judgment.
run Kamala. Please run her.
They're going to run Biden. It's going to be Biden, and it's going to be the boring thing. Probably, it's usually the boring thing. We're just so used to it being the weird thing lately, even though it's usually the boring thing. But thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And stick around because we'll be back with more Rising right after this.